Hi, then again. It's Morris, your host for another episode of You Matter podcast. So, everyone, welcome back again for another insight and perspective that we'll be discussing for today's episode. So, again, I just wanted to provide a brief overview about our specific topic for today. And I've chose this topic just because I seem to be wanting to express my thoughts and also experience and how I deal to any of the particular situation when it comes to worrying about what other people think about you. Well, it is inevitable and we are normally having these kind of issue in our daily lives. It is always happening. Like it seems like that's already a part of a routine that we cannot control the fate of having a tendency to worry such things. Well, that's also a part of us to be disciplined and how to be able to manage that well so it won't affect our overall well being. So then again, welcome and chill. Then especially have to lend your ears with me so that I can manage to also express fully what you wanted to hear and so you could relate to what I perceive when it comes to these particular concern. So as individuals, we happen to be engaged in a society or even a community. We engage through most of the people, some of them are strangers. We used to acquaintance those kind of person and anyone, anybody you think of like you've already interacted with. And you happen to think that what if that person has something that tells you negatively? Like it comes to our mind, will we tend to react first before confirming it. We always assume such things that made us feel overwhelmed in a particular situation. Like, for instance, you just met this stranger, which is a friend of your friend, and then you feel like that stranger seem not to like you. Just because you're observing their behavior or how they gestures towards you, you think of it like you interpreted it as they probably was judging you or anything that you conclude in your thoughts. Actually, that would be a possible thing where we recognize how people are actually is not trying to make a big deal out of it. Like that person was actually just so confused and was just so curious about your overall looks. Yeah, that is one of the prior thing a person could ever do is to judge your whole style or anything that shows your overall appearance. Well, actually, it's normal that we assume what people might think about us, but it is not always a normal thing that we have to adopt ourselves because it could really affect us, as I said earlier, and it would lead us to feel like we're so overwhelmed with the thought that is actually most of the thoughts were unnecessary to emphasize. So we have to understand why is it really important to deal worrying the opinions of others appropriately and manage ourselves on being disciplined while accepting what actually is being perceived or what actually others perceive about us. So, anxiety, stress, self doubt, we have everything that psychologically is common factor that really affects us and could torture us emotionally. Okay, So you've been there. We've been there. Experiencing these stress, trauma, and how you're also paralyzed from the past, like you couldn't even move on from it just because you thought of a situation where it leads you to an impactful life that it's just so hard for you to ease it off. When you're worrying a lot, how does this affect you personally? It may affect your relationships with them, your work performance, and also your well being. How does this affect your relationships? Well, if you worry about what other people might think about you and you were so concerned of how they might judge you or what they thought about you negatively, and that influence you to detach engaging with them. I mean, you detach yourself instead of socializing with them. You're just trying to protect your ego that you do not want yourself to get hurt. And that's the major thing that we are wanting to prevent ourselves from the consequences that we do not want it to happen because it leads you to a very costly transformation. In other words, when someone already damages you verbally or yeah, commonly people are verbally so mean and those who are hurting us verbally let us feel damaged and we cannot and we do not know how to turn things back to normal. That's why we're making an advanced thought that we should have to protect this before anything bad happens. So just based on my experience, personally I've also encountered this instance where instead of confronting it, facing my fears, I decided to hide myself and really wanted to secure myself by simply living alone. I decided to just live in a nuke, just wanted to do things alone. I don't want to engage with anybody because I don't want them to get involved in me just to enter into my life and then ruining me, causing me a damage that I could not able to move on in the near future. It really hurts to bear the experience where you cannot forget the bad things easily. That's part of the trauma and it really is not helping you, especially in growing your character. Because yeah, the bad experience might actually lead you to change in perspective. A bad experience that may also influence you to either make a good or a bad choice. We had a different kind of perspective, and it's up to us on what we choose, on what our heart wanted to do, and what our brain was trying to say that you have to do this thing, you have to do this thing instead of doing that. Just because we follow either the two our heart and our brain, that's where we know the outcome of our choices. Main reason of why we happen to make a choice that we did not expect. So, why is it really important for us to have a self awareness and recognize when worrying about others' opinions? That is also becoming problematic. Yeah, it is really necessary for us to understand that we ourselves has to centralize a healthy relationship with ourselves. Because at the end of the day, only yourself is the one thing they could remind you to have a better living. Things are becoming more problematic when you're trying to emphasize and you read a lot of the gestures and might as well you have already misinterpreted them. You overlook the positive side because you are fearing but believing the uncertainties. So how do we able to manage worrying about others' opinions? First, we have to be mindful or you can meditate. If you feel like you were overwhelmed with emotions and there are plenty of opinions, thoughts that you think is true in your mind, you just have to be mindful of what you were been thinking was helpful or it actually is not important thing that you have to big deal. And meditation, it calms your nerves and it calms your mind. And that way you can make a good decision way better. Secondly, reframing negative thoughts. Instead of thinking that they had a negative thoughts about you turn it into a side way more positive. It's not just thinking that you have to forget what actually is confirming you already that you had done a very negative thing that they do not like about you. It's not like I wanted to point out that you have to forget those bad things that actually is negative because they're saying that negatively against you because you've proven a bad thing actually. It's not a tolerating that bad behavior, but it is trying to extend an idea that you have to make a proper way on dealing those negative thoughts. Instead of formulating those negative thoughts continuously forming inside your head, you have to think another alternative, and that equates the negative thoughts into a positive affirmation, saying that instead of thinking that I'm a bad person, you may say, I can improve myself to be better. You should not stuck yourself from the past experience just because they thought of you so bad that you do not want to hear it and you're selfishly trying to explore yourself to prove them that you have done the right thing. You don't have to prove yourself. But the important thing is you just have to be yourself just so you can fully accept who you are and that would encourage you to improve yourself better, to build a good character that will lead you to be an imaginable person that somehow would probably influence others as well, and you would inspire them to make a change in your life. Third is building self-confidence and self-acceptance. How is it really relating to us that building self-confidence and self-acceptance involve? Like what I've mentioned, self-confidence is a one prior thing that people have been struggling. So self-confidence is one of the major thing that most of the people are were struggling on how they would able to build this confidence just because they had a full of insecurities. They doubt themselves and they do not know how to manage themselves like being expressive of who they are. Self-confidence is a need for you to embrace what's growing in you. And if you fail to embrace who you really are, that lets you being unable to protect your core personalities and values. And if you do not have a self confidence, fail to embrace who you are, then you cannot proceed with that self acceptance. Fail to embrace your personality is somehow equatable on failing to embrace your past. You just have to accept and you just have to be confident in everything you do. Everything is not perfect and everything might be a bad decision at first, but later on you could discover it and you can find a proper way in addressing those problems so it could be better. Therefore, I would like to emphasize that you do not have to always worry about what others think about you. You probably misread some of them. You just overlook the positive side of it, and maybe you were just so overwhelmed with what their thoughts about you just because you do not have the confidence in you. It is not really easy to build those basic things that others perceive or basic personality that a person has already obtained because we grew up in a different environment and it depends on how we are thought in our home. You may be still living in your own comfort zone, and that leads you to have a close minded perspective, and you hardly express yourself in a way that you won't feel scared on accepting the criticisms. And also, take note of this. You maybe consider reading the gestures of a person through how they approach you or anything, like how they look at you and all, but it does not imply anything. You have to stop reading too much about why they acted this way to you, unlike to the other one. You maybe is relating to yourself and questioning yourself that you probably look bad, you're out of their status, you're not in the same level as them. But it's not that important for you to emphasize that your person who is willing and interested to be with you will remain to go after you even if you had less to offer to them. A genuine person will lead their way to you as long as they have appreciated you and recognize your simplicity. So, the true person comes under thought of pure intentions. They make effort, they initiate, and most importantly is they are so concerned of you. Those are real people you should have to focus on. So, listeners, it's really important for you to just so embrace yourself. If you happen to get along in a particular context, that it is inevitable to deal with what other of what they would probably think of you. Just get rid of the bad thoughts, but instead make a flexible solutions that would make you a better person and see yourself bigger than you were before. Be reminded to have confidence in yourself and do accept what you and do accept what you've done because it may not change, but you may improve it. So, thank you so much for listening. I hope you guys learned some lessons and I hope this relates to you also. Just wanted to share these concern of mine because I just felt so overwhelmed and I just want to express my thought on how it actually is and how I actually perceive worrying about others' opinion because I overthink a lot of it. And I could prove that it is not really good. And later on, you'd also get used to it and you get tired of it. It actually getting tiresome, and you'd realize that why am I thinking about this? And you'll have all the reflections and you could laugh about it and sooner or later because probably it's not still your time to understand context. But as soon as you have the experience, that would be a chance for you to enhance your understanding about life. So, again, thank you so much for listening. I'm Morris, your host, signing off.